What happened? What are you doing in the middle of a funeral?
This is bad. Look at this note. I ran out of the funeral home in a panic during my mother-in-law's funeral. My husband, startled, chased after me. I showed my husband the note I found in my mother-in-law's hand, and he was surprised too. We would soon call the police. My mother-in-law and I had been close, as if we were a real mother and daughter, before my husband and I got married. My mother-in-law was very special to me because I had lost both of my parents. I'm very happy that I married my husband, whom I love, but I'm also very happy that I became accustomed to my mother-in-law. Then, my mother-in-law suddenly passed away. She fell from a balcony. During her funeral, I held her hand in the coffin and found a note with the most frightening thing written on it. I am Jane, and I'm 30 years old, and I have an office job. My husband Mike is 2 years older than me and works in sales. We were both students in the music club at the same university. We only talked occasionally during our college days because we both were in relationships. My husband is a very good singer and writes wonderful songs that cheer us up when we listen to them. The band in which my husband sang was the most popular in the music club, and I think it was at the level where they could have gone pro. I remember that I looked up to my husband and felt a little sad when I heard that he was going to quit the band and get a regular job after graduation. A few years after graduating from college, I went to a live music club to see a band I liked and happened to run into him again. We were both there alone, and we had a lot to talk about after a long time, so we ended up having dinner together after the show. We had dinner together after the concert, and there was no end to our conversation, so we decided to go to karaoke. Mike's singing voice was as beautiful as it had been back then. I was happy to know that he was continuing to play in a band while working. After that day, I often went to live concerts and dinners with Mike. No matter how many times we went, we always had a lot to talk about. And before we knew it, it would already be past midnight. We had known each other for a long time, and we liked the same bands, but I didn't think we would have such a good rapport. Mike seems to feel the same way, and we started dating a few months after we met again. After I started dating him, I was so happy every day. Of course, I enjoyed seeing Mike every day, but I also enjoyed going to the occasional live concert where his band performed. Mike introduced me to his mother, who had come to see him perform for the first time of many times. "Hello, I'm Jane, Mike's girlfriend." I nervously introduced myself. "You don't have to be so nervous. I've always been sad being at the concert alone. I'm glad you're here," my mother-in-law said and shook my hand. My mother-in-law had a wonderful smile and looked so young that I couldn't believe she had given birth to Mike. She didn't look out of place in a live music club full of young people. Afterwards, we had a lot of fun talking about today's concert. Although our age gap was quite large, I felt as if I was talking to someone my own age, and we quickly became friends in just one day. We exchanged contact information that day, and my mother-in-law and I started going to see Mike's live concert together. We sometimes had dinner before or after the concert, and I looked forward to that because she knew many good restaurants. My mother-in-law would smile at me as I ate deliciously. Even if I left Mike, I was so fond of my mother-in-law that I wanted to continue my relationship with her. 3 years later, we got married. I was so surprised and happy that I couldn't stop crying when my husband proposed to me from the stage during one of his concerts. I looked at my mother-in-law, who was standing next to me. "I'm so happy that Jane and I are going to be a family. I'm so glad, she said with tears streaming down her face. I laughed when I saw my mother-in-law crying more than me. I have been without a mother for as long as I can remember, and my father died of illness right after I graduated from college. I have no siblings, so I have no one I can call family. I was so happy not only to be married, but also to be a family with my husband and mother-in-law whom I love very much. Soon, I started living with my husband and mother-in-law. My father-in-law apparently passed away a few years ago due to illness. My mother-in-law quit her job to take care of my father-in-law and now works part-time at a shopping center several times a week. I had only met my mother-in-law outside the house, so I discovered many new things about her when I started living with her. First of all, she is a very good cook. She is very skilled and makes dishes every day that are restaurant quality. She told me that her hobby is to go to many good restaurants and study cooking every day. Another thing is that she lives a very healthy lifestyle. She gets up early in the morning to go running, stretches carefully every night, and go to bed at 10 p.m. I thought my mother-in-law's usefulness came from her daily efforts. I have always loved my mother-in-law, but living with her every day has taught me a lot about what I need to learn from her. I've become a better cook, and although not as good as my mother-in-law, I've unknowingly lost a lot of weight that I hadn't lost in a long time because of my healthy lifestyle. Since we got married, a lot of great things have happened. I'm so happy every day. I have nothing but gratitude for my husband and mother-in-law. My husband and I have been able to be like lovers, just as we were before we got married. He sang to me at home sometimes, and I was happy to hear my husband singing anytime. When I would cook dishes modeled after my mother-in-law's,
Jane, this is amazing. It might taste better than my mom's.
he would compliment me like so. No way, your mom is the one who taught me. When I say this, no, this is your skill. You've got a good sense for cooking, my mother-in-law would say as she laughs. 3 years into our marriage, we were still happy. We never had any fights, and we lived a peaceful life. One day, however, the atmosphere in the home changed when my sister-in-law suddenly returned home. My sister-in-law, Amelia, is 5 years older than my husband. I couldn't believe that she was family with my always cheerful mother-in-law and husband, since she had an overbearing personality. We invited her to our wedding, but she refused. So this was the first time I met her. She had been married and a housewife, but she was divorced and had suddenly returned home. She did not tell my mother-in-law and my husband in advance about it, and they were surprised to see her. I'm going to live here from today. Would you clean up my room? My sister-in-law said coldly to me as I was about to greet her. I was off work that day, so I did as my sister-in-law told me and cleaned up her room, which was in a state of storage. My husband and mother-in-law said they would talk to my sister-in-law. For the first time since we got married, there was a sense of discomfort in the home. As I was cleaning up, I was listening to the conversation. I don't mind you living here, but you have to work and put money in the house. Don't cause trouble for Jane, my mother-in-law said. I know that. Mom, you're always so annoying, my sister-in-law retorts.
Sis, don't talk like that. If you're going to live here, you should let us know in advance. If you can keep your promises, I will have you leave, my husband said in a strong tone. Yeah, whatever. Mike, you're always on Mom's side, my sister-in-law replied. I had never seen my husband speak in such a strong tone. My mother-in-law's usual smile disappeared, and she looked doubtful.
I didn't say anything after hearing this conversation, but I was worried about the days to come. After that, my life changed drastically. My sister-in-law began to give me a hard time. When I came home from work, "Hey, I'm hungry. You're a wife, right? When you come home, make dinner quickly," she would tell me before I even have time to put away my bags. When I quickly began to make dinner, my mother-in-law came home and asked me, "Jane, what's wrong? You can cook dinner once you change. Mike's not even home yet." She says this to me sounding worried. I couldn't say that Amelia told me to do this, so I was feeling troubled. "I told her to do it. She's a wife, so it's natural for her to do this. Mom, you're being too easy on her." My sister-in-law said without a trace of apology, "What's natural? If you ask me, it's only natural that you, who isn't working yet, should be the one to cook. Are you looking for a job in the first place?" When she says this, Amelia replies, "There's no good job out there, so it can't be helped. You're always taking the wife's side rather than mine." She started talking selfishly like a child, and the two of them started arguing. I felt awkward, but I could only concentrate on making dinner in silence. My husband came home and saw my mother-in-law and sister-in-law arguing.
Hey, what's going on? Amelia, did you say something selfish again?"
Amelia replies, "Why is it my fault? You didn't even listen to my side of the story. In the first place, that wife of yours," and she pointed at me, "Jane is not to blame. Stop blaming others." And then the arguing continues.
"I get it now. Both of you stop it. The food Jane cooked is getting cold. Let's eat dinner."
And my husband calms them both down. I felt bad because I was the one who started it. I'm glad my mother-in-law is protective of me, but that makes my sister-in-law angry. I didn't know how to behave properly anymore. After my sister-in-law went back to her room, "Jane, I'm really sorry. If she says anything to you, you tell me right away."
"Jane, I'm really sorry. My sister has always been like that,"
they told me. After that, my sister-in-law would give me a hard time, and there were many times when my mother-in-law would defend me, and they would end up arguing. Each time, my sister-in-law would say, "I can't believe you take the wife's side instead of your own daughter's." I think my mother-in-law is not only taking my side, but she's angry with my sister-in-law because she's the cause of the problem. But it hurt to hear her say that. And when the two of them argue, my husband gets angry too. It got to the point where there would be a fight at least once a day. My sister-in-law says she's looking for a job, but there's no sign of her starting to work at all. She does not do any housework and spends most of the day in bed or on the couch looking at her phone. My mother-in-law, who used to smile and look so young every day, seems to have aged a little since my sister-in-law came back. I wonder if she gets tired of arguing with her. My husband has stopped singing at home. He hasn't performed at any live concert recently. It seems that the happy days we used to have just a few months ago were just a dream. A few days later, while I was at work, I received a phone call from my husband. My mother-in-law had fallen from the balcony and had to be rushed to the emergency room. Since we live on the 5th floor, I was so worried about my mother-in-law that I left work early and headed for the hospital. However, by the time I arrived at the hospital, my mother-in-law had already passed away. The atmosphere in our home had been bad recently, and I didn't have as many chances to enjoy talking with my mother-in-law as I used to. I couldn't stop crying for a long time. thinking that there were so many things I wanted to talk about and do with her. My sister-in-law was at home when my mother-in-law fell off the balcony. I wondered for a moment, could it have been my sister-in-law? But I tried not to think about it, because even though we weren't close, I knew she wouldn't go that far. According to my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law was hanging the laundry on the balcony. My sister-in-law said that she heard a loud noise as she was lounging around as usual, and when she went to the balcony, she couldn't see my mother-in-law and called the police. My sister-in-law was crying as she spoke. We then made arrangements for the wake and funeral. My husband made most of the arrangements, but the time passed in a flurry as we dealt with many relatives and acquaintances of my mother-in-law. Surprisingly, my sister-in-law was also very cooperative and did a lot of work. I decided to concentrate on sending my mother-in-law on her way during the funeral. At the end of the funeral, I said goodbye to my mother-in-law in the casket. As I recalled everything that had happened to my mother-in-law from the day I met her until now, I was filled with many thoughts and feelings. With tears streaming down my face, I took my mother-in-law's hand for the last time and found a small piece of paper in her hand. When I took it out, it looked like a torn piece of a notepad. Curious, I looked inside the note and was astonished. I couldn't stop shaking at the sight of the dreadful note and ran out of the room. People in the hall were looking at me with a buzz. As I was outside crying and shaking, my husband came after me.
What happened? What are you doing in the middle of a funeral?
My husband seemed angry. Of course he would be. I just ran out in the middle of a funeral. With trembling hands, I showed him the note. This is bad. Look at this note. The note in my mother-in-law's hand read, It's Mom's fault for always taking the wife's side. If you had taken my side, none of this would have happened. Your favorite wife will be next. And it was written in my sister-in-law's handwriting. It was like she was saying she did it. It's not conclusive evidence, but it might be something. Just imagining how she must have felt writing such a note was terrifying. I was afraid to even look at my sister-in-law's face. All I could do was run away. But,
what the hell is this? I'm going to go talk to the people in the hall, so wait here.
My husband couldn't hide his emotions, but he knew he had to be firm, and he handled it calmly.
Jane, it's okay. I'm with you. We'll get the police to do something about it. It's better for Mom.
My husband said, hugging me as I trembled. My husband told the people in the hall what had happened, showed them the note, and they called the police. I waited there shaking. My sister-in-law came outside and asked me, What's going on? Don't you think it's disrespectful to my mother to be flapping around during a funeral? Why are you outside? You're insane. Then my husband said,
Shut up and sit inside,
he said loudly. My sister-in-law returned to the hall with a strange look on her face. I guess she didn't think we had seen her note. The attendee also looked at us strangely, but the funeral proceeded to the end, and when they finished putting my mother-in-law in the hearse, the police arrived and took my sister-in-law to the police station. My sister-in-law said, I don't understand. Why should I go to the police? What did I do? She was in a rage the whole time. My husband and I looked at her coldly as she was being taken away by the police. The people in attendance were in a state of confusion, but they went straight to the crematorium. That was the last time I saw my sister-in-law. The house was searched again, and my sister-in-law confessed to the crime, and she was arrested later that day. I heard her crying like a child at the police station, saying she hated her mother, who wouldn't take her side. They found sleeping pills in her room, which Amelia mixed into my mother-in-law's drink, and then instructed her to dry the laundry. While drying the laundry, my sister-in-law apparently pushed my drowsy mother-in-law on her back. She really only meant to injure her, but she died, partly because of the concrete underneath. When I heard the police story, I was filled with fear and anger. I really can't forgive her. She's a selfish woman. I was terrified that my sister-in-law would come home until I got the call that she was under arrest. When the news of her arrest came, my husband and I were relieved. Then a criminal trial took place, and my sister-in-law was found guilty. She was also thinking of rebelling against me, so the charges were more serious, and she was going to jail for more than 10 years. I really wish the charges were more serious, but it's a court decision, so I guess it's inevitable. My husband handled all the criminal trials. Now that the investigation was over, I laid my hands firmly on my mother-in-law's grave and apologized over and over in my heart. I'm still scared to this day that if I hadn't found the note then, maybe I would have been next. My husband and I told each other's company about the situation, filed moving papers, and moved to another part of the country so that we wouldn't have to face my sister-in-law who came out of prison one day. I don't think she will ever find out where we moved. We decided to build my mother-in-law's grave in the place where we moved. We started a new life in a new place without changing our jobs. To be honest, I haven't completely recovered. There are days when I remember my mother-in-law and cry. Still, my husband and I decided to look forward to life little by little. Whenever I feel down, my husband sings to me. My husband happily tells me that he hopes he can form a band again in a new town. On the other hand, when my husband is down, I cook a dish that my mother-in-law taught me and eat it with him. In this way, we encouraged each other and gradually moved forward. Before going to work in the morning and before going to bed at night, my husband and I always offer incense and pray at my mother-in-law's altar. When I say I'm off when I got to work, I think I hear my mother-in-law's voice.
Did I just hear my mom say stay safe?
Maybe my husband can hear my mother-in-law's voice too. My mother-in-law is no longer here, but she will always be someone I look up to, just as she always has been. Today, I'm cooking something she taught me how to make.
What the heck is this? The room is covered in dust. You're just trying to get out of doing housework because you're sick, aren't you? You know I like things clean. For God's sake. Even if you had to sneak out of the hospital, you should come home and do housework properly. The person I call my husband is probably not a human, but a demon or something. Otherwise, there's no way he would say such foolish things to his wife, who is in the hospital with cancer. But what a waste this ignorant man is. Excuse me, but your wife is now... The doctor's words were just the beginning of this man's descent into hell. My name is Sarah, a 35-year-old office worker. I've been married to my husband Kenny for almost 3 years now. I'd like to say that we have a wonderful married life, but the truth is, we don't. Work is enjoyable, and it feels great when hard work pays off and gets recognized. But the problem lies at home. When I come home exhausted, it's Kenny who's already home and greets me. Is delivery okay for dinner? Kenny answers me. Hey, even though you have a job, don't you think you're slacking off too much? Here, look at this. He shows me a photo of a dinner table with fancy dishes. By the way, he's shown it to me dozens of times. It all started about 2 years ago when Kenny attended his high school reunion. I want to unify the furniture, and and make the room look like this. See? My husband showed me a stylish room photo that looked like a model house. It seems he went to a friend's house for drinks after a reunion. His friend lived in a high-rise condo, and my husband seemed to envy that room. However, the friend was a successful young businessman, and our household income was not high enough to live a similar lifestyle. Moreover, my husband said he wanted to move out. He wanted to live in a room that cost twice the rent of our current apartment. So, where are we going to get the money for that? My husband said to my cold reaction, "We'll manage it somehow, you know? I mean, we're both working, so we'll figure it out, right?" Finally, I got angry with my husband snickering and said, "Enough already! Do you even understand the concept of living within our means? From now on, you should pay for your beer with your own pocket money." He glared at me, maybe because I was scary, and muttered, "What? I was just joking. You're such a buzzkill." He was mumbling for a while, but I was sure he wasn't joking. We continued to bicker, and I started to experience stomach pains and other stress-related symptoms. I thought it was just stress until something strange happened to my body. I started bleeding, even though it wasn't my period, and it wouldn't stop. I went to a nearby hospital and was diagnosed endometrial cancer. Hearing the diagnosis, my body shivered, even though it wasn't cold. Then, the doctor said something that made it worse. "Do you plan to get pregnant in the future?" It was a severe condition, and the best option was to remove the uterus. I will talk to my husband. I couldn't stop crying while driving home. If I lost my uterus, I wouldn't be able to have children ever. I wonder what Kenny's reaction will be. He loves children, so I'm afraid of getting divorced. When my husband returned home, I talked to him about the test results, treatment, and his thoughts. We took the time to have a conversation for the first time in a while. My husband was very shocked, but we made a decision. After that, I took a leave of absence from work, and my treatment began. In the end, we decided to undergo chemotherapy after having my uterus removed. On the day of the surgery, my husband took the day off and accompanied me to the hospital. I felt uneasy about my husband's oddly cheerful mood. However, I overcame major surgery and lost my uterus. During my hospital stay, colleagues and friends came to visit me. I felt sad that a friend with a child came to visit me. My in-laws who lived nearby also came to visit me. "You did well, Sarah." After those words of encouragement, my mother-in-law said, "I know it's tough, but please take care of the household finances and chores a little more carefully." My father-in-law immediately interrupted her. "Hey, stop it. Not now. Sarah, never mind, okay?" I had no idea what their conversation meant at that time. As for my husband Kenny, he always seemed to be in a good mood whenever he visited me in the hospital. "Sarah, you might be surprised when you get discharged." "Well, look forward to it." I thought I would be happier about anyone who came to visit me, rather than a surprise. After a while, I was scheduled to be discharged temporarily and was excited to return home. I would be admitted to the hospital again soon for chemotherapy. When my husband picked me up from the hospital, he said, "Don't be surprised when you see inside the house." I had a feeling of unease. What is this? As soon as I entered the house, I was shocked. The inside of the house had changed drastically from before I was hospitalized. The previously fresh and white-themed rooms had turned into a sleek black-themed one. The sofa and table that I liked as well as the rug that was on the floor, were all gone. Everything had been replaced with furniture that my husband liked. What surprised me even more was that all the appliances, including the washing machine and refrigerator, had been replaced with new black ones. I was frozen in shock at the sight. How's that? Pretty amazing, right? I did it all by myself. At my husband's smug remark, I felt like collapsing. I hurried to the bedroom. Once inside, it was clear that it was also completely different from before. My wardrobe. Oh no. Where's my wardrobe? At my words, my husband's face grew anxious. Oh, that. Sorry. I guess I got carried away and threw it away. My patience finally ran out with my husband's nonchalant chuckling. What? You threw it away? Don't joke around. Do you remember how important that wardrobe was to me? I told you that, didn't I? Bring it back here now. Give it back. With every shout, my wound throbbed with pain. My husband stayed silent for a moment before speaking. I said I already threw it away, so there's nothing I can do. You're so annoying. He then stormed out of the room. I collapsed into a sitting position in the now unrecognizable room. I didn't want to cry, but tears flowed down on my face anyway. The truth was that the wardrobe was a precious gift from my mother when I got a job and left home. My parents had divorced when I was in elementary school, and I had lived with my mother ever since. She had passed away in a traffic accident not long after I got married. That wardrobe was an irreplaceable moment of my late mother. Of course, I had told my husband about it many times. Life had been a living hell until my next hospitalization. I had been looking forward to coming home so much, but my husband had been in a bad mood and barely spoke to me since then. Not only that, but he demanded that I do the housework, even though my wounds were still hurting. Don't ask the impossible. I'm in a recovery period, and I need to rest. You should take care of yourself. After that day, my husband began to harass me. He only cared about himself. He would intentionally wash only his own clothes and avoid washing mine. When he brought food, he would eat it in front of me as if flaunting it. I was tired of his childish behavior and didn't have the energy to deal with him. So I turned to my friends for support. On the day of my readmission, my husband did not accompany me to the hospital, and I went alone. Chemotherapy was much harder than I imagined. I was shocked to see my hair falling out day by day, in addition to nausea. As for my husband, he went on a long business trip shortly after my admission. I thought he would contact me out of concern, but he didn't contact me at all during my hospitalization. One day, my phone rang continuously, and I hesitated to answer because I no longer had the energy to talk to my husband. Then, my husband called the hospital out of impatience. I switched to speaker call. What the heck is this? The room is covered in dust. You're just trying to get out of doing housework because you're sick, aren't you? You know I like things clean, for God's sake. Even if you have to sneak out of the hospital, you should come home and do housework properly. The nurse who brought the phone looked tense. Then, the unexpected person who responded to my husband's foolish words was, "Excuse me, but your wife just left the hospital a moment ago and is currently busy with procedures. Can you please not disturb her with nonsense talk?" What? Who do you think you were to speak like that? You can clean the house yourself. In all my years as a doctor, I've never met such an ignorant person like you. I'm disgusted. The doctor hung up the phone, leaving my husband flustered. Later, the doctor explained to me that he had a doctor and had become emotional, and he apologized for his rudeness. I told him not to worry, and that I planned to divorce my husband anyway. After being discharged, I went to a certain place, and my husband came into the room, looking upset.
Mom, Dad, what are you doing here?
My husband stood there, silently, without offering any words of comfort upon seeing me. My mother-in-law coldly said to him,
We went to pick her up because today was the day of her discharge. Sit down over there, Kenny.
My husband's eyes flickered, as if he had something to hide, and he was visibly shaking.
You have something to apologize to Sarah and us, don't you?
My mother-in-law asked my husband, who remained silent.
You asked us for financial assistance, claiming that Sarah spends money recklessly. Was it all lies, wasn't it? Explain.
My furious father-in-law's voice echoed through the room. It turned out that my husband had told a very malicious lie. During my second hospitalization, my in-laws told me something.
I know this is not the time to discuss it, Sarah, but we want to make it clear that this will be the last time we lend you money.
My mother-in-law told me. I was stunned.
Excuse me?
What is this all about? That was when we first realized that my husband was lying. My in-laws thought it was strange that my husband would come begging for money, even when I was hospitalized. Then he begged them for help with my hospital expenses, claiming that they were too expensive. I immediately knew where my husband's money was going. If you come to our house, you'll find out right away what Kenny is spending the money on. I told my in-laws, giving them the key to our house. They returned to the hospital, surprised by what they had seen. I have no intention of continuing to live with your son as a married couple. I'm divorcing him. What I can't forgive the most is that he got rid of the wardrobe my mother gave to me.
What do you mean? The wardrobe? You're saying that Kenny threw away your mother's wardrobe? No, I will never forgive him for what he's done to you.
I told my mother-in-law, who grasped my hands in tears. I can't and I won't spend my life with you anymore.
I mean, I would slap you right now if I wasn't still recovering.
My voice trembled with anger, and my husband retorted,
No, divorce is too extreme. You must be happy that your room looks stylish, right? You should be grateful.
The house was pitch black and my heart was sinking. We managed our living expenses through joint incomes in my husband's account, while saving for the future in mine. We had saved up for when we had a child. When I was diagnosed with cancer, he had become selfish, thinking that he could use the money however he wanted, since I could no longer bear children. That made me extremely sad.
Don't you understand how much I care for you, Sarah? This is wrong. You can't divorce me.
I looked at my crying husband with a cold gaze. Then, my mother-in-law, who was sitting next to me, shouted at him.
Shut it, Kenny. You treated Sarah so horribly, and you should know that.
Even though I lost my hair and weight, you, Kenny, haven't shown any concern for me. You've only been thinking about protecting yourself. I can't be with someone like that anymore. My husband remained silent, hanging his head. After a while, we divorced. Thanks to the effort to my ex-in-laws, the division of property were in my favor. My ex-husband reluctantly repaid the money he had borrowed from his parents, a sum of $30,000. Although we had just finished remodeling our house, My ex-husband couldn't afford to live there alone on his salary and decided to move out. He now lives in a shabby apartment that he had to borrow money to pay for. I have a friend who works at the same company as my ex-husband. I heard that he's now labeled as a dangerous person who harasses his wife, who is battling cancer. He brought it upon himself. He can regret it for the rest of his life. As for me, I am enjoying living alone for the first time in years, while undergoing regular checkups. Once my physical strength stabilized a bit more, I plan to return to work. My boss has assured me that it's okay to do it at my own pace, which I'm grateful for. I'm just so glad my mother's wardrobe has been returned to me. I found it at an antique shop when I brought in some of my unwanted item after moving. It was what my mother gave me, and it may not have been an expensive piece of furniture, but it was the only memento that I cherished. On the back corner of the wardrobe was my late mother's writing, "Sarah, always be happy." I've tried my best to remember my mother's words and worked hard. Of course, that won't change in the future. I attended my daughter's funeral without being able to sort out my thoughts. My 27-year-old daughter had suddenly passed away. As I stared blankly at her house, my 4-year-old grandson pulled on my skirt and murmured a shocking phrase. And my daughter's mother-in-law, who was nearby, listening to those words, turned pale. Her tragic end was just beginning. I'm Tina, a 50-year-old housewife, and I work part-time at a local diner. I have a daughter named Lauren. She got married to her husband Keith when she was 21. At first, she lived with her in-laws, but she couldn't get along with her mother-in-law. So they live separately now. No grandchildren yet, Lauren. How many years has it been since you got married? You are really useless. You are not fulfilling your role as a daughter-in-law. It seems that she was repeatedly blamed by her mother-in-law about children until her grandson Alex was born. Furthermore, you can't have children because you are always working, can't you? Don't neglect your housework because of work. At that time, my daughter and her husband were both working, but she was also burdened with housework at her in-laws' house. Moreover, it seems that she was even nagged about the details of housework. I want to be recognized as a good daughter-in-law, you know? Although she was enthusiastic about it when she started living with them, as time went on, she began to complain more and more. No matter what I do, my mother-in-law complains. I mean, she should just do it herself. Her in-law's house was a 5-hour flight from where I lived. I felt frustrated that I couldn't rush to my daughter when she's in need. Lauren, honey, if it's too tough, come back here once in a while. You need to take a break from your job as a daughter-in-law too, you know? Thank you, Mom, but I'm okay. Sorry to worry you. Can I talk to you about my complaints again sometime? I couldn't say anything more to my daughter who said that. After that, I was often told about her mother-in-law's complaint by Lauren. But as the physical distance couldn't be shortened, I also thought about how to support my daughter mentally. And I also gradually began to feel uncomfortable with her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law hated it extremely when Lauren came home to our place. She even called me directly. Lauren is our daughter-in-law. And yet, she told me that she wants to go back to your place for a while for Thanksgiving. Please be sure to warn her too. Would you? What? But Lauren is also our daughter. So, can't we allow meeting her a few times a year? Lauren is doing well here, you know. Do you really need to meet her so often? Even if I tried, The answer from her mother-in-law was always one-sided. I thought it wouldn't be good to argue too much, considering Lauren's position, so I ended up going along with her mother-in-law's opinion. However, Lauren's husband convinced his mother. Even if you say she's doing well over here, it's obvious that they want to meet her every once in a while. Didn't you always tell me that you were lonely and wanted us to come back here to live with you? Remember? We somehow managed to get permission for a few visits home per year. Whoa, she even called you? I'm sorry, Mom. I really want to build a good relationship with her, but the day after her mother-in-law's contact, Lauren contacted me with a voice full of apologies. No, don't be sorry, honey. I couldn't do anything for you either. I had such frustrating conversation with my daughter many times. Then one day, Lauren contacted me saying that her mother-in-law was angry because I didn't send her a return gift for a present. Huh? I haven't received anything from your husband's family, even once. And yet she demands such things from me? What is that? I was surprised and raised my voice. Really? I knew something was off. I don't understand anything that my mother-in-law is saying or doing anymore. Lauren's voice over the phone showed signs of exhaustion. Well, I'll try. I will hurry and send something. But you should definitely discuss it properly with your husband. I told Lauren that and hung up. About 2 years had passed since Lauren started living with her in-laws when she contacted me again. The relationship with her just can't seem to improve. I think it's better for me not to be around her. Keith feels the same way too. So, we decided to live separately from my in-laws. Apparently, Lauren's husband also judged that he couldn't handle his mother and decided to move out. Well, even if we say we're living separately, it's still within walking distance. I felt relieved when I heard Lauren's laughing voice over the phone. Then, about a year after Lauren and her family left their in-laws' home, I received the news that she was pregnant with her first child. I was happy to hear the news, but secretly thought that the stress of living with her in-laws may have been a factor in Lauren not getting pregnant until now. Lauren gave birth to a healthy baby boy named Alex. However, her mental state began to deteriorate rapidly due to her mother-in-law's overbearing nature. At the suggestion of her husband, when Alex was 2 years old, they came to live with us for several years. Lauren was so mentally exhausted that she had become quite thin. I deeply regretted that I had not been able to do anything for her until then. After a while, Alex, who had started to speak a little, began to say strange things. Granny, the man with the injured eye is not here today. What, Alex? That man with the line in his eye. Alex pointed to his own right eye and asked me about it. The truth is, my father, who passed away, lost his vision in his right eye and had a scar from an accident at work when he was young. My father passed away when I was young, and the pictures were kept at my parents' house. So even Lauren didn't know about the scar. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but his bizarre stories continued many times. The man with the injured eye looks real sad. He's saying his house is about to break down. I told my mother about this. Later, we received a report that the stone on my father's grave had been broken by someone or something. From then on, I felt that maybe Alex had a sixth sense. Lauren seemed to have the same perspective, but she didn't pay much attention to it. I wonder who Alex inherited it from. 2 years passed, and Lauren's mental and physical condition began to recover. So they returned to her in-laws' house. However, she still received a bunch of sarcasm from her mother-in-law. "What a terrible woman you are! Taking away my grandson who is the heir. From now on, I will raise Alex in our house." Thankfully, Lauren's husband and father-in-law, her mother-in-law was restricted in contact with them, so she seemed to be able to spend a more comfortable life than before. However, tragedy struck suddenly. One day, out of nowhere, Lauren's husband contacted me and told me that Lauren had fallen down the stairs and died. This news was hardly believable. However, when I rushed to the hospital, she had already become cold, and I had to accept the reality. Soon after, the funeral was held, and of course, Lauren's husband, Alex, and her mother-in-law attended. I managed to maintain my composure and exchanged a greeting with her mother-in-law. But falling down the stairs? Was she not paying attention? With her words, I couldn't even think of her as a human being, and I didn't have the energy to argue back.
Mom, how can you say that even at a time like this?
Lauren's husband also heard his mother's words and accused her furiously, but she seemed completely indifferent. Then she said to him, who was holding Alex, "Why don't you watch him carefully instead? Don't let him say anything creepy like he always does."
Mom, cut it out.
Lauren's husband was clearly upset with his mother.
Excuse me, I'm going to step out for a bit. Can you take care of Alex for a while?
Lauren's husband entrusted me with Alex and forcibly took his mother outside the venue. Alex seemed unable to comprehend that his mother had passed away, and I was doing my best to hold back tears.
"Granny, why do you look so sad? Mommy's worried about you."
Alex looked at my face with a worried expression. I felt tears that I had been holding back quietly overflow.
Alex, sweetheart, is Mommy here?
"Yeah, she was behind you until a little while ago. She's with Grandma now, over there with Daddy."
Saying that, Alex pointed to where Lauren's husband and mother-in-law.
"Mommy said Grandma pushed her on the stairs."
Huh? As soon as I heard Alex's words, all the attendees turned their attention to us.
Alex, don't say things like that.
Lauren's mother-in-law looked pale at his words, and I could see she was flustered. "Alex, can you tell me the story about Mommy later?" I spoke to Alex to calm the situation down. After the funeral was over, I returned to Lauren's home with Alex and talked to him slowly. Meanwhile, the mother-in-law was taken to the in-laws' house.
Well, Alex, can you tell me the story now?
"Mommy's story? Sure, let's go to my room. Mommy's saying something good is in my room."
Alex led me to his room, holding my hand with a cheerful expression.
"That thing over there, can you take it for me?"
And looking around the room, Alex pointed the box. Upon checking the contents, there were a small camera and recorder inside. According to Lauren's husband, Alex seemed to be talking to someone even though he was alone, and he would stare intently at nothing. Lauren found it interesting and installed a sound-detecting camera and recorder.
Alex, do you know what this is for?
"No, but Daddy knows, right?"
With Lauren's husband, we nervously confirmed the contents. On the camera, we saw Lauren's mother-in-law breaking into Alex's room, disregarding Lauren's protest. The two women were clearly arguing, and although the stairs were out of sight, the recorder captured her voices and a loud thud. The content was so shocking that I fainted on the spot. I woke up in the hospital, and Lauren's husband explained what happened afterward. Right after I fainted, he immediately contacted the police and submitted the audio and video recordings. The police had been investigating Lauren's accident, and along with the recordings from Alex's room, Lauren's mother-in-law was investigated and arrested a few days later. I took care of Alex for a while, and he seemed to be having a great time at our place. Lauren's husband later told me that his mother had suffered a mental breakdown and was currently in a state of confusion.
If only that child hadn't said anything. And that bitch, she should go to hell.
She eventually became unresponsive during police questioning. When she found out that Lauren was alone that day, she stormed into her house and got into a fight. They struggled, and she ended up pushing Lauren down the stairs. Lauren was still alive when her mother-in-law left the house. However, Lauren couldn't get up on her own and passed away shortly after.
I'm sorry for being so useless. That day, I went out with Alex to give Lauren a break, but I never expected my mother to show up. I can't. I'm sorry.
Lauren's husband apologized to me while crying, and I could only listen in shock without being able to sort out my own feelings. Then Alex, who was watching me closely, came over and petted my head.
Granny, Mommy told me to do this. She said she can't touch you, but I can.
He looked at me with a smile. I hugged Alex and cried for a long time before finally gathering my thoughts. Lauren's mother-in-law was taken to the police station, and her hallucinations seemed to have subsided. So there were no legal issues related to her mental state. She was found guilty and became a resident on the other side of the wall. Lauren's husband had to explain the situation to his company, and as a result, he was able to transfer to a neighboring state where I live. While he worked, I took care of Alex.
I know you don't want to see me, but for Alex's sake, would you allow me to live nearby?
He said this, and I agreed. Keith, when you find someone new, I'll take care of Alex for you. So don't worry, okay?
Thank you, but Lauren is my only wife. I will work my hardest for her sake and raise Alex into a fine human being.
As for me, I had enough savings from my late husband's inheritance to live comfortably. I spent my days enjoying time with my grandson. As for Alex, he no longer said strange things like he did before. Whenever I ask him about it, he just says,
I don't know.
That's all he says. Alex seemed to be enjoying himself with his new friends every day. I still think about my daughter Lauren and cry until my tears run out when I'm alone at night. But for Alex's future, I want to love him as much as I would have loved Lauren.